talk about one of those Section 8 deals. How'd you analyze the deal and how'd you find that deal? Purchase price, rehab, the rents and stuff like that.
So my very first deal, I was fully guided in, total transparency. Mike selected the property. This is a good one. And he showed me it was a $205,000 property in Maine. I said, how much is rent? He said $2,000 and change. And so it was right at the 1% rule. I calculated it up myself and I said, okay, even after I pay you, that's going to cash flow about $700 a month. And so I'm putting in, let's just say 50. So you're putting in $50,000, $700 a month. That works out to about $8,400 a year. Typically, you have to put in 20 to 25% on a second property for everyone out there listening. And so I was like, okay, that's pretty good ROI on $50,000 of return. And then Maine itself was growing and appreciating at a high rate. Like according to Redfin, my properties, this is just 3 years ago, is now at 240. I purchased it at 205. It's near Lake Sebago. Anyone can look it up. Lake Sebago is one of the top vacation areas in Maine.
The deal that you're trying to acquire right now, how did you find this deal? What do you expect to buy it for? What do you expect to rehab to be for? And how much do you think you're going to rent it out for?
So list price is $125. I did put an offer in at $131, so over ask to get the deal. But I did put an inspection contingency on it. There were some things that need to be fixed. So we are going to tell the seller that either A, they fix them, or B, they got to knock off the price for us to fix them. I have different criteria that maybe a seller might put some lipstick on the house to make it look better. But then I'm looking at the safety components because like if your house is unsafe, you will fail inspection. So 131 is the sale price, pending seller concessions or whatever that might happen between now and then. Loans, I'm currently floating the interest rate because I do believe that the interest rates will fall. It's a 4-bedroom, 1.5 bath townhome. It's got an HOA dues of $124.50, but the rent on it will be over $1,800 a month. So that well beats the 1% rule. I heard something online from Alex Hermosi that I adopted very quickly to Section 8 real estate. And that is forecast the growth of an area based on another business's ability to acquire real estate. And he chose Chick-fil-A. And I said, that sounds great. So if you're within 3 miles of a Chick-fil-A, the property appreciation on your property is quite substantial. So I told my realtor, I'm looking to get in Greensboro because I can see that it's an emerging city. It's got Volvo HQ, Mac HQ. It's got a couple of headquartered companies there. So it's an emerging economy. And then he said, what are you looking for? I said, I want cool townhomes near Chick-fil-A's. And that's how we started.
Welcome to another episode of Affordable Housing and Real Estate Investing. Today, we got Albert Joe. Albert is one of the partners from Mike Caggiano. And man, we've had Mike Caggiano on here for like a 3-peat. And I said, man, let me get one of your partners on this podcast. And it's like, why don't you get Albert on here? And I said, let me go bring this guy on because he's already on his 5th Section 8 property. He's been through the trenches. He's not just the guy that talks the talk. He walks the walk. And he gets to share all his advice, real numbers, real examples, real problems with RBT. So that's why I'm so excited to get Albert on the podcast. Albert, how you doing today, man?
Yeah, I'm happy to be here. Glad to talk about investing in Section 8 or investing in properties and renting to Section 8 voucher holders. Yeah, really quick. This is my 5th. I'm about to acquire my 5th. So I have 4 right now, but I'm under contract for number 5. That's going to come down in September. And I've only been doing it since around 2020 timeframe. So it's not been long, but basically learned the ways. And I see it as probably going to add a house a year. That's my game plan.
Man, I really love your approach because sometimes when people get into real estate, like, oh, I can't wait to quit my W-2 job and go on a real estate. And here you are demonstrating how you can be successful, taking it at your own pace, doing it one property at a year at a time, if that is what you want, and being successful at it. So for the people that don't really know anything about you, man, who's Albert, and how'd you even get into Section 8 investing, man?
Yeah, so my current day job is I'm a small business operator owner, right? So I have Diesel Jack Media, which is a agency. We do video production, commercials, as well as original works. I also am a partner in Mission, which is a podcasting company. We do podcasts for the people. I'm the host of IT Visionaries. And how I got into Section 8 was actually through Michael. We worked at a software company prior to me. Back in the day, I left the software company, but he stayed. And I always joked with him, but like even back then, we, as in the people who were at that company, always noticed Mike had more discretionary income than what was showing on his W-2. You know what I mean? Like I was in charge of that company. I clearly knew how much we were paying him. And I was like, I don't understand how you have all this discretionary money. And he had talked to me about being a real estate owner and how he was leveraging the Section 8 program. And at the time, we talk about it in the show that I did with him, is that I didn't find it interesting because I was always chasing windfalls when I was younger. So in my 30s, my opinion was in software is the fastest way to make, let's say, $1 million, whatever the number is, because you could hit it. And I was always chasing windfalls. And Mike was kind of like steady Eddie, just constantly building cash flow. Well, fast forward, and like there was a little bit of period of time post COVID when tech stocks fell apart and all my money was in tech stocks. So I saw my net worth like crumble by 20, 30%. And I was like, oh, this sucks, right? I have cash on the sidelines. Teach me about how to do this. He taught me how to do it. And of course, I've been doing it since.
Man, there's so many lessons to pull apart from that, Albert. One is Mike started talking about his real estate stuff at work with his colleagues. And I give this advice sometimes to folks where they're like, hey, I really want to quit my job. And I said, when I was kind of
he still hasn't quit his job either. Just in total reference, he hasn't quit his job either.
Yeah. But if you are taking that opportunity to tell other people at work, right? Other people have similar goals as you, right? Everybody wants that financial freedom, the freedom of time, the freedom of choice to spend more quality time with your family, all that stuff. And if you view other folks as potential partners, not just your colleagues at work, that could open up another pool of capital that's available to invest with you and help you scale a lot faster. I just wish people would really understand that instead of viewing their colleagues as just their colleagues. Those colleagues of yours, they're your friends, and they probably might be potential investors in the future. So I really hope people take a little different perspective when they are just going to work every day and they think they're grinding, but in reality, if they just pull their heads out of the sand, they can realize like, hey, there's a lot more opportunity in here and I can help a lot more people at the same time. So I just wanted to highlight that from your story. And I wish people would just have a little different perspective.
Yeah. You never know who you can meet. So like sharing goals, sharing successes, but that part of that comes with like this, like, I think it comes from a fear. People have a real big fear of showing money, talking money. How much money do I make? Especially traditionally in the workforce, people just are uncomfortable. But in reality, for anyone who's out there, like if you're really smart and good at what you need to do, or you don't need to, but you will benefit from letting other people know you are very smart too. Because most people, me and Mike have learned this through doing the training courses, most people actually don't want to do it. They'd rather just pay you. So I say it's similar to like changing your oil. I think everybody knows changing your oil is quite easy. Like anyone can learn how to do it. But there's a reason why Jiffy Lube and those companies exist, because people don't want to do it. And when it comes to investing, that's the one thing I've learned doing the training program is so many people want you to do it, meaning they'll front the money. They just don't want to get their hand. They don't want to do it. They basically just rather pay someone else to handle everything for them, which is, an option. There's a lot of people that have made quite a bit doing that.
Man, this is so good because I know we didn't talk about any of these questions, but I love to understand, Albert, when you first, let's say, approached Mike, or maybe just for anybody out there right now that are thinking about getting into this and they want to learn, what questions do you suggest that they actually ask? Like meaningful questions, tangible questions that can get them answers that might help them. Here's an example. I get these questions all the time, like, hey, what market should I invest in? I get these questions all the time. But if you were starting over, right, you're getting to acquire your fifth, and you had to re-ask some of the questions in the beginning that might get you further along in your journey or just help you jumpstart a lot faster, what kind of questions do you think people should be asking before they get
Well, I think people don't know themselves at all. So they don't recognize who they are at all. And that's why they ask questions that are the wrong questions. So the number one question people tend to ask is like upside opportunity. So they want to know how much money they can make, how quickly can they make it. They want to learn all the things about like let's say the benefits, the pros. We call them waiters, but like that's not why the real reason why people wait. The real reason why people wait is they don't understand the risks. And so they have an inherent belief of risk. And if the risk belief is greater than the opportunity on the other side, they basically won't do it. Most people, for example, that don't chase their dreams have the same problem. Like their risk is their W-2 job. So their W-2 job, let's say, pays them $100,000 a year. I'm just going to make that number up, but that's a pretty good salary, right? Once you get to $100,000 a year, that feels like a lot of risk. Like, oh, start my own company. Like, hey, I've always had a dream of owning a gym or being a baker. I don't know. People have different dreams, but they cannot comprehend the risk they're about to take. So they try to justify the risk by understanding the upside. I think that's why most people talk about real estate, but don't actually do it, because when they do the math, it's actually quite slow. So you're not going to replace your W-2 income, for example, in one calendar year. So then you feel like there's so much risk involved to earn a very little amount. I don't feel like that's an appropriate ratio of risk to reward. So I choose not to do anything. Most people live like that. That's my firm belief. And that's why there's a high percentage of people who have never really attempted to chase a dream.
Ooh, that is so good. And these mindset issues, we hear them all the time. And I love your analogy there. If you were to try to coach someone or help someone get over that hump, right? Understand the risk and understanding your worst case scenario is not like you're out on the streets and you're sleeping on, you're homeless, right? Because if you came from $100,000 job,
that's definitely how people think for sure.
How might you coach them through that?
So in general, I don't try to make people do things they don't want because I don't feel the need to carry that responsibility with me in any way, shape, or form. So I don't try to convince people that don't want to be convinced. I tend to just kind of go with the flow of what I know. And so how I viewed it more was, what is my optimal life? How do I get there? And so for me, what I learned about myself very early on is my number one hobby is surfing. But in order to surf, it typically means, and when I say typically, it 100% means I am at a remote location with limited availability, meaning like during the day, like when the waves are pumping, I want to be out in the water. So that could be at any time during a day. So I've always looked at work as like, what kind of jobs fit that schedule, right? And owning assets fits that schedule. So I've always wanted to own assets to pay me. And so I have a mindset, for example, I'm very much looking into UPS stores, their likeliness to cash flow. And so my thought process is, people say, well, you can make $120,000 a year off of a UPS store. And I was like, well, I could hire someone to general manage it and pay them a good salary, $80,000 a year, and I'll net 40. That's greater than 10% return. Most UPS stores can be acquired for under $300,000. And someone's like, well, why would you do that? It's like, because I don't actually want to be there. I want to go surfing. And so that's kind of how my mindset's always been, is how do I unlock more time at the waves around the world? And so that's when I learned more about Section 8, that's what it became more appealing to me. So it answered what I wanted to do. And I wasn't scared of the risk because I didn't really think, for me personally, I was already in a risky mindset, meaning like I have small businesses, I've invested in Bitcoin. Like I'm not as afraid of it.
Man, that is so cool. I love that you brought up surfing. Man, I love surfing, but I'm terrible. I'm so bad at it, dude. My wife is way better.
I just love it. I truly, truly love it. Yeah. I bring it up on every call. Like, you know what I mean?
I know the feeling when you finish a wave, you can't describe that to anybody until you just go through it. You're like, that is so
dude, that's cool. Why you paddle back out, right? And it's also, that's why every surfer knows you don't go in empty handed, meaning if you go in on a wave. No one paddles back, paddle of shame. I mean, it happens, but you try not to. And then if it's a good one, you never come in. You're like, well, one more.
One more. Or you finish a really good wave. You're like, did my wife see that? Oh, no, she wasn't looking.
Dude, I long gave up my wife being interested in me surfing, dude. It's not even a criteria. Like it's nowhere on the radar.
My wife is so much better than I because she does yoga. So she's so much better at it then, which is because she's so much better balancing.
There you go.
Man, the audience must be thinking like, what are these guys talking about? All right, let's get back to it because so you got your first property. Tell us a little bit about how you're feeling when you got the first property. Were you super afraid? Were you scared? How much handholding did you feel like you needed from someone like Mike?
Well, I knew I needed quite a bit, but I was willing to pay him also. So I wasn't scared to pay somebody. So they talk about it a lot in another podcast on My First Million. You'll hear it from different entrepreneurs. But what you're really trying to do is shrink the total time to learn. And so sometimes the best way to shrink that is to work with somebody who is very, very much knowledgeable in whatever subject that is. So in this case, let's call it like property management. So my goal was to shrink the amount of time it took me to learn something. So for me, the only way to shrink that time is A, to do the thing, right? Buy a property, acquire a property, invest in it, go through all the paperwork. And then B, I was willing to pay Mike, who was already doing it, to teach me how to do it. So I was willing to give him the exact number a property manager would charge. So most property managers charge 1 month's rent plus 10% every single month, which works out to 18% a year. So I told Mike, I'll pay you 18% a year. Walk me through this. And he was like, done. Because he had no capital risk. He was just investing his time. And I was like, yeah, this was like my fee I was willing to pay to learn as fast as possible.
Man, I love these cheat codes or hacks in life.
It's not a hack. I mean, it's just straight up like opportunity cost, I think. I think people very much so undervalue their time. You know what I mean? People, for whatever reason, think, oh, I'll learn it on my own. I'm going to Google all this. Like, oh my God, dude, that's such a waste of time. If you're smart and you think you're worth $100 an hour, $50 an hour, whatever you think you're worth, why would you not pay some money to acquire time? You know what I mean? Like, I that's the way I view it. Like, I want to learn fast. I don't want to learn slow.
Yeah. And I love that methodology because some of the things that I've learned from my mentor, Alvin, is that he kind of told me, hey, anything under 100 units, if you're trying to go for a multifamily, just isn't worth it because of all the compliance, responsibilities and all this paperwork that you got to do. It doesn't work because you can't afford the overhead. And that's how I quickly shaved 3 years off my time from pursuing these smaller deals to going after ground up construction deals, because I know that you can actually support the amount of work and the amount of units to actually do that work. So that automatically shaved like 3 years on time. So I completely relate to you. If you can work for people that are listening right now, you can work with someone like Albert, you can work with someone like Mike, you can shave a lot of time off your learning journey.
Yeah, and that's the biggest thing about everything is the power of compounding. For example, time is the key. So it's not timing the market, it's time in market. It's true with stocks, it's true with real estate. I believe it's true with real estate. It's true in everything. So the faster you can, like they say, the first 100,000 the hardest to make. The first 100,000 the hardest to make. At a traditional stock return, 8%, you're talking about 8 years away from doubling your money, right? So you have to get to something quickly so that even small returns compound heavily, because small returns on big numbers is still a big number. And so for me, I was going to pay 18% anyways. You know what I'm saying? But like I would be paying a property manager. And when I tell people I paid 18%, they're like, oh my God, that's so much. Like it's exactly what I would have paid to not learn anything.
Man, dude. So, all right, let's talk about this then. You must have heard some of the myths about Section 8. I'm assuming like guns, drugs.
Well, yeah, I have. Yeah, definitely. Just like anyone else, you've heard negative stories. So those are some of the things I wanted to de-risk from Mike right out the gate.
And how did you overcome that risk? Did you overcome that risk by asking Mike questions, working with him, or maybe you focus more on the numbers first? Tell a little bit to the audience about how you approached it.
Yeah, great question. So knowing someone who's been doing it is the key. I would say meet up with somebody who is actively doing it, because they will have either A, they can share their experience, which you'll most likely find out that they haven't really had that many bad issues, or B, they know how to deal with bad issues. If they've had them, they know how to deal with them. So don't take advice from people who haven't walked the path. And that is the number one thing I will tell anyone who's doing this, because most people say they've heard this, and then you ask, well, who told you that? And if it's not a Section 8 operator, then you don't know anything. You're just sharing stories with some. It's like you and me talking about being astronauts. Who cares? It's not real. This is not at all how we train to be an astronaut. We're like, Kent told me. You know what I mean?
Kent told me. I saw this documentary where you had to go under the water in the pool, and that's how you do it.
Yo, Kent told me, man. He told me. He told me that you have to die, drown, and they bring you back to life. And so what you find is that most people have over-indexed or overvalue opinions of people who have not done the thing. And when I teach people in small business, because I've now done it a handful of times, small business mentorship, I always tell people, do not listen to people who haven't done it. They have no domain knowledge. They're just sitting over there telling you to not chase your dream, not invest in this property. That's a bad location. You have done nothing. What gives you any expertise? You have none. Your opinion is literally invalid. You know what I mean? And it's the equivalent of you and me trying to tell someone why they shouldn't go to NASA to train because what we've heard.
And that's been sort of the number one advice that I've been hearing that I've been trying to give to other folks, because I was like, just be careful about who you share your dreams with, because when you share your dreams with the wrong person and their intentions might be to protect you, right? Maybe they don't want to see you fail. Maybe they don't want to see you get hurt. Maybe they don't want to see you go off to space.
Yeah.
They're going to say something that might just veer you off the path a little bit.
Talk to people of what? So like you will learn from someone who was in multifamily. I've learned from someone who's in single family. So is what you've been taught wrong? I don't think so. What you've been taught is the experience. All you've been taught is the experience of another person. And so, yes, I knew and heard all that. So I would ask Mike, like, well, what about crime? What about drugs? What about non-payment? What about bad credit scores? All the whatabouts. And he's like, no. And I mean, it's not hard to figure out. He lives in a palatial home. Like, you know what I mean? He's like, Albert, I've been doing this for 17 years. You think I'm so stupid that I'd get my ass kicked in year 5 and I just did 12 more years for shits and giggles? No, that's nonsense. Of course it's worked out for him. He has a path for it to work for him. So if you walk his same path, could it work for you? I mean, there's a probability it will. And so that's what I chose to do.
And I'm so glad that you and Mike have gone through those bumps and the bruises, right? Chopped down a path and laid out a path and say, hey, I can't make you walk the path, but there it is. Feel free to walk it down, because I've gone through those bumps and bruises. So, yeah, man, let's kind of bring it all together. Let's talk about one of those Section 8 deals. Can you share with us, I mean, what did you look at? How did you analyze the deal, and how did you find that deal? I would love to get through some actual details, right? The purchase price, rehab, the rents and stuff like that. Let's kind of take us through one of the deals for the audience, kind of make it all real for folks.
Yeah, so my very first deal, I was fully guided in, total transparency. Mike selected the property. This is a good one. And he showed me it was a $205,000 property in Maine. I said, how much is rent? He said $2,000 and change. And so it was right at the 1% rule. I calculated it up myself and I said, okay, so it's going to cash flow. Even after I pay you, that's going to cash flow about $700 a month to me. And so I'm putting in, so on a $200,000 property, that's $50,000. Let's just say 50. So you're putting in $50,000, $700 a month. That works out to about $8,400 a year. Typically, you have to put in 20 to 25% on a second property. For everyone out there listening, I make a little over $700, but $8,400 a year is what I was taking in. And so I was like, okay, That's pretty good ROI on $50,000 of return. And then Maine itself was growing and appreciating at a high rate. The housing prices, like according to Redfin, my properties, this is just 3 years ago, is now at 240. I purchased at 205. And so Mike has a strategy where he buys near vacation towns. And so I was like, okay, that's easy, right? So like mine's near Lake Sebago. Anyone can look it up. Lake Sebago is one of the top vacation areas in Maine. And so I was like, okay, then that's an easy number too. And so once I knew all the numbers worked out, I purchased the house sight unseen. I've actually never seen it.
Wow, that sounds so scary for some folks. But how'd you de-risk it? You worked with someone that was there that probably had a team. You worked with someone that knew how to analyze the numbers, and $700 a month, that was a good enough spread. Did that include sort of maintenance and property management?
Everything. So I net $8,400 a year on that one.
Okay.
I net actually a little bit more because various reasons why, but $8,400 was what I calculated.
And what was your experience with the first tenant that you got in there?
So the very first tenant actually wasn't good. It was actually quite a headache. You can ask Mike about it. Like, he was really bothered by it because he's like, you're helping out a friend, and like the first experience is not good. The first experience I had was with a young mom, and she definitely wanted to party, I would say, a lot. So she had a lot of guests over, and the HOA was really not a fan, and like constantly telling me like, hey, this is a distraction and stuff. And so we just told her and said, hey, listen, you're going to get evicted because the HOA wants you out. So either you walk out and I will release you from your lease, or you get evicted and you get kicked off the program forever. Because she had too many strikes against her of like different violations, and they were watching her effectively. Like, a lot of townhouse units or apartment complexes, noise ordinances are very common. So like, after 10 p.m., you can't have excessive noise without getting like if you're throwing a block party, like, you kind of have to tell everybody before you do it. And so she actually was willing to leave to avoid an eviction because she just wasn't willing to change.
Wow. And I'm so glad you told that story, Albert, because I think this kind of pulls back the curtain a little bit, right? For folks like, hey, all these fears. Albert had this problem on his first property, but this is how he resolved it. And I'm really hoping people would take that lesson away from you and what you and Mike went through, because, man, even if there's a problem, if you can attach a number to it and attach a solution to it, it just feels a little bit less scary. I mean, how did you bounce back from that? Did you just find another tenant and they're working out perfectly? What did that look like for you, Albert?
Yeah. So that's the beauty and the sadness of the affordable housing, is that there is so much demand for this is not going to go unrented. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, for those who are worried about vacancy, well, how do I find a tenant? So the person got a notice that they intended to vacate in 30 days if they were granted full release from the lease, which I granted. So the person said, okay, I'm leaving. No problem. So we immediately put the house up for rent. And so it was already signed before she moved out. So the turn time was like a day. She moved out and then a new family moved in. So total rents lost $0.
That is so epic.
And that person's been in place ever since.
And no issues. No issues.
There have been issues, but not because of her. I had a neighbor with a leaking water tank. That sucked.
Oh, man.
Sucked. So it ended up damaging my property. So it's not without maintenance issues, but they're not the scary ones, right? Because it's like, this would have happened in a private. This unit specifically, if it had a private market rental, third-party rental, it would have had the same problem. The neighbor's tank burst. What are you going to do? If you have attached housing, that is a risk. And I only buy attached housing. But yeah, so that sucked, but it wasn't due to the tenant. You're saying like, it's not because it's a Section 8 rental.
Yeah. And I think that's where sometimes the message get all convoluted, where they're like, oh, it's because it's a Section 8 home. No, you can have a bad tenant with a market rate tenant. You can have a bad tenant with an Airbnb. This can all happen no matter
and you could have bad luck by your neighbor, which wouldn't, of course, not matter no matter who you had in the place.
Exactly. That's right. Man, I'm so glad you shared these stories. All right. Well, let's talk about the deal that you're trying to acquire right now.
Yeah.
I love talking about real life examples. How did you find this deal, and how did you even analyze the deal, and where are you in the process right now?
Yeah. So shortly after learning in Maine, I started looking into where are some emerging cities near me that I could that would fit the 1% rule. I just use the 1% rule because it's a really easy thing to think about. And then I heard something online from Alex Hermosi that I adopted very quickly to Section 8 real estate. And that is, forecast the growth of an area based on another business's ability to acquire real estate. And he says, and he chose Chick-fil-A. And I said, that sounds great, because Chick-fil-A owns all of its footprints. For anyone who doesn't know, the franchisees don't get to pick the locations. Corporate HQ picks the locations. Chick-fil-A serves a higher kind of market, if you will, in the world of fast casual or fast food restaurants. So if you're within 3 miles of a Chick-fil-A, the property appreciation on your property is quite substantial. So I started pretty simple. I told my realtor, I'm looking to get in Greensboro, because I could see via Redfin that Greensboro, North Carolina is about 70 miles from me. I can see that it's an emerging city. It's got Volvo HQ, Mac HQ. It's got a couple of headquartered companies there. So it's an emerging economy. It's got great infrastructure. I knew that though through driving through there. And then he said, what are you looking for? I said, I want cool townhomes near Chick-fil-A's. And that's how we started. And so I got one 2 years ago for 164. It's now appraised at 200. I mean, meaning my neighbors are selling theirs for 200. And then I'm about to go under contract with another one. So I let the other people that are really good at do their job, and I just ride their wake. You know what I mean? Chick-fil-A goes in, I'm going in. It's good enough for Chick-fil-A. It's good enough for me. Last time I checked, Chick-fil-A's aren't being built in bum towns.
I love this example because
it's easy.
Sometimes you hear about examples about people looking for Starbucks and Whole Foods or whatever, right? You have an amazing example, Chick-fil-A. This is the first time I've ever heard about it. So this is like breaking news on a podcast right now for
Whole Foods. Whole Foods is a great one too. Like I'm sure, like if you buy within a mile of Whole Foods, you might get priced out of Section 8 if you buy within a mile of Whole Foods. But yeah, anything near Whole Foods is a good idea too.
To set the example for some folks listening, right? Whenever we look at ground up construction deals, we do third-party market studies. And third-party market studies typically do demographic studies, income studies, blah, 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 blah. But those cost like 3, 5, 7 grand. Sometimes I've seen them as high as 10 grand. Yeah. And that would be that wouldn't financially make sense for a single family home investment. So Albert is a genius here. He found somebody else that's doing these market studies and he's just riding the coattails of them. Well, Albert, you talked about Chick-fil-A, right? Are you looking for Chick-fil-A's that have been announced and then you
they can be existing. They can already be existing. They can be existing. Doesn't matter. You're looking for basically something that fits the 1% rule near a Chick-fil-A. This is simple criteria. And people are like, there's not such things. Like there are. Then how do I find them? There absolutely are.
Do you go after bedroom additions or like, hey, if this is a 2-bedroom townhome, I like those ones better because I can add extra bedroom. What other strategies do you have besides for 1% in near Chick-fil-A?
Yeah. So adding a bedroom is actually, relatively easy. I like turnkey. So I definitely look for things that are closer to turnkey. I don't mind a little bit of investment, but I don't look for too much investment. So a lot of times these townhomes are in pretty good shape because the neighbors, let's say, they care a lot. And so I've been pretty fortunate that the townhomes are as advertised, if you will. And so that's been good. Now I did during there was like a buying blitz, I would say 2 years ago, where people were buying, starter homes sight unseen. I did buy a townhouse without an inspection. I would not recommend that. I would never do that again.
Ooh, so what lesson you learned from that one?
Yeah. So the house was polybutylene piping. Do you know what this is? Okay. In the 1980s, polybutylene piping became really popular. It was a byproduct of, I want to say DuPont Chemical Company or Dow, one of the big chemical companies. And it turns out that after about a few decades of hard water, they crack. They just crack and they just break apart. And it was a class action lawsuit against Dow, and the chemical maker lost. So they lost because they did all their studies on short-term water retention. They didn't do it over long-term. So they lost, and that product was banned. It was no longer allowed to be used in new construction. But that doesn't mean your house doesn't have it. So it was built in the 1980s. You might have it. Polybutylene is spelled Polybutylene, I believe. Don't hold me to that. So what started happening was this house, the unit I had started leak. Like there was a leak. Okay, fix the leak, no problem. But then there's like another leak literally like a few weeks later. Then a third leak. Like I was like, what is going on? They're like, your whole house is polybutylene piping. And I just wrote to the HOA and said, what is this? This wasn't disclosed. And turns out it's not required to be disclosed. So you could ask your inspector to inspect it, but it's not actually required for disclosure. And I was like kind of taken aback. And I was like, so how many houses have been like repiped? And they're like, oh, well, it was a good percentage, like more than 50. And so I was like, okay. Then I started asking like who repiped the houses. I did get a guy to repipe my house. That ended up costing me almost 10 grand. So that was a huge mistake, one that I won't make again. So if you're buying investment property, you want to know exactly how many dollars are going in, because of course it'll mess up your calculations if you're wrong. Go ahead and tell the buyer or seller, that, hey, I want to offer this pending an inspection. I bought it sight unseen, no inspection, because that was part of the buying blitz. You know what I mean? Like people were like, I gotta get properties. Well, properties were being sold like $10,000, $20,000 over market price, sight unseen. So I was like, how do I compete with these people? So I was like, all right, well, well, I guess I got to do it too.
Yeah, and everyone was waiving inspection contingencies and stuff like that just to make their offer more competitive, right? So
That's right.
Risk. I had similar issues with my properties in Scottsdale. Their sewer pipes were made out of this material called Orangeburg, and essentially it's just tarp. Like it just crumbles. It just crumbles over time. So essentially every single property that you buy, you had to pretty much put in a new sewer pipe or put in a new liner. And that's like minimum I spent was $3,500. One property was $7,000 just to redo the sewer. And those are huge expenses that will take a toll on your return on investment. So
I'm not going to net a return on this house for a while. Like I'm kind of stuck with it a little bit, but it's already appreciated enough to cover the cost of the repair and so on. This is the one that I acquired for right under 165. It's now appreciated to about 200,000 in 2 years. So I've made it back in appreciation, but I definitely lost out on cash, like my cash reserves I used to maintain the properties. That sucked to take a hit like that. But I just view it as like I'm playing a long-term game. And so like, yeah, short-term pain, long-term gain kind of concept. It was a really expensive lesson. So I've learned that lesson. You won't be able to trap me again on a improperly put whatever home, you know?
Was that in Greensboro or was that in Maine?
That was in Greensboro. Yeah, Greensboro, North Carolina.
And who did you use to repipe your home? Do you remember that contractor or plumber?
Yeah, his name's Mike Tilley Plumbing. He handled it. It was a $6,400 job. It was $6,400, but then there was other things that got uncovered. It ended up all in cost to be close to $10,000. But by the time I added up all the leak events and stuff like that, it was $6,400. But by the way, get some quotes too, because I also got quoted over $20,000 for it.
Well, Albert just helped you guys save about $10,000 just now. So make sure you guys follow Albert. And I think the real lesson here is for those folks that are still afraid of getting into this. Right now, after hearing all of Albert's stories, he's someone I want to invest with. Because he went through the trenches, he went through the sludge, he got these lessons learned that now he's able to help you compress your timeline so that you don't make the same mistake of making an offer on a property without inspection. You don't make the mistake of not looking at the pipe materials, right? These are the lessons that make you more valuable and more appealing. Again, if you're in a W-2 job, you tell these stories to other folks, they're going to be like, I want to invest with Albert. Because he just went through all these pain. He already learned these expensive lessons.
Yeah, well, what I've learned is what people really don't want is they don't want to experience them themselves. So they feel like if they invest with you, like, okay, you've already seen this, be more mindful or watch for it and probably not fall victim to it again. And so I am fortunate that I don't make the same mistake twice, but I definitely make mistakes.
All right, let's get people excited again. This property that you're working on right now, what do you expect to buy it for? What do you expect to rehab to be for? And how much do you expect you're going to rent it out for?
So list price is $125. I did put an offer in at $131, so over ask to get the deal. But I did put an inspection contingency on it. There were some things that need to be fixed. So we are going to tell the seller that either A, they fix them, or B, they got to knock off the price for us to fix them. One of the things that people like to think about, or maybe fail to think about, is they want to buy an investment property often as they buy their own home. So they look at things like fixtures and like paint color and maybe appliance selection. I'm not as worried about that. Affordable housing is really about providing a safe place for a family to be. So I'm more looking at like, hey, do all the outlets work? Is this properly vented? Are the windowsills locking? Like, so I have different criteria that maybe a seller might put some lipstick on the house to make it look better. But then I'm looking at the safety components, because like if your house is unsafe, you will fail inspection. For example, like the fence line was definitely needed repair. And I said, like, this is unsafe. Either I have to take away the fence or you repair the fence, and you can take it away. Right, because it's got like shards of wood like hanging off of it. It's like, this ain't gonna pass inspection. You know, like a wood fence, it doesn't last forever. So that's $131 is the sale price, pending seller concessions or whatever that might happen between now and then. Closing date, September 23rd right now. And loans, I'm currently floating the interest rate because I do believe that the interest rates will fall. I am working with Rocket. I tend to work with Rocket because Rocket's the fastest, most online lender, I would say. And I get really frustrated in email exchanges with lenders. I find them to be really annoying people. So I like having a tool that has everything that I need to upload and download. Plus I have stock in Rocket, so I feel like I'm paying myself. So that's the deal right now, $131. And it's a 4-bedroom, 1.5 bath townhome. So for those who want to plug in numbers, so I have a sale price of $131. It's got an HOA dues of $124.50, but the rent on it will be over $1,800 a month. So that well beats the 1% rule.
That's a great deal. Let me peel it back, right? Because you're using Rocket. Sometimes we don't hear about people using Rocket that often. You said a floating interest rate. Can you share with the audience, like, what does a floating interest rate mean and what you're getting as part of that product?
So when people quote interest rates, they almost always are quoting your first primary home mortgage. So like they're saying like, oh, the national average is 6.5%. That's for your primary. For investment properties, your interest rate's almost always higher at primary residence. So Rocket Mortgage it's a huge company, services, I believe, the whole country. I don't know what state they don't service. But what's unique about Rocket and why I like using them is because it's the most online lender there is. Okay. So like, meaning you can apply online, you can handle all your paperwork online. They have portals, like everything's online. They have auto connections to your bank accounts. And additionally, like if you do deals with them, they give you like rewards points, which can be redeemed for cash and so on. And they also offer like really discounted refinancing. So to me, it's all in. I don't like shopping that much. I'm a creature of convenience because remember, my primary goal is not to make money. My primary goal is to create time. That's all I care about. So if it costs me a little bit more to create more time, perfect, because time to me is invaluable. So I don't want to waste my time in email exchanges with a lender that I think's annoying, which I think almost every lender is annoying. So a floating interest rate simply means that you're not going to commit to the interest rate for your loan until I think it's like 15 days prior to close or 10 days prior to close. So I will not lock in my interest rate until really September 13th. And so what that means, because, based on the Bureau of Labor Statistics revising down their jobs creation by over 800,000, based upon the fact that inflation's fallen to what the Fed requires, based on an election cycle, I know that I believe the Fed will cut rates. But if I'm wrong, I'm wrong too. I'm okay that my total loan repayment is going to be less than $700 a month. I've already been quoted at 7.375 interest because I'm going to put 25% down. So I'm going to need to borrow 98,000 for anyone listening, trying to calculate the numbers. I'm going to borrow 98,000 and change. The repayment on that on 30 years, 7.3 is approximately 681, something like that. So I'll have to repay like 700.
Is that a DSCR loan or is that like an investment property loan that you're using your W-2 income and wages to qualify?
Correct. That's an investment property loan using my W-2 income.
Got it.
DSCR loans are always higher interest rates for everyone out there. It's well higher than like a FHA conforming loan is. So I believe the number's 9, like a person can have 9 mortgages, something like that. So I plan on leveraging 9 until I can't. And then I'll use commercial loans or LLCs or whatever vehicle is the best vehicle at that time. But since it's not here today for me, and it won't be for at least 4 years, I don't worry about it. That's another thing that I do not think about things that are not currently or like in my near-term future. That is a waste of energy, I feel like.
Man, I just really like your strategy because you anticipate and you foresee, and this isn't just a bet. It's a calculated bet that the interest rates might fall because we've literally seen it fall by the 10-year yield fall by half a point in just the last month. So there is definitely high chances of it continuing lower if the Fed.
But I do all my evaluations on a worst case scenario. So that means I'll either be rewarded or I'll be right, but I'll never be wrong.
Oh, that's so good. Oh, that's so good. I love it. Hey, Albert, we're getting near to the end of our podcast recording today, and I want to make sure I give you a little bit more time. We talked a ton about mindset and advice. Is there any other advice that you would give for folks that are looking to get into Section 8 investing?
Well, I would always want to know what the person wants. So, like one of the things that we talk about in ours is like, do you want to escape the middle class? That is a common complaint, I would say. A lot of people, like they feel like they're trapped by their W-2. They're trapped by their wage, whatever they earn, they spend. And so the idea is like, you have to be able to earn more. If you want to escape that, typically it means you need to earn more money. Very few people have figured out ways to earn money without investing their time, right? Because like you could say like, oh, pick up more hours. Like, that defeats the point of living. Like now I can't go to my kid's hockey game. I can't go to my kid's diving class. I'm picking up hours doing something else. I don't want to do that. The only way you can escape the middle class is if you can earn more income while investing less time. So that's the thing I think about is like, what do you want? If you want to escape the middle class because you feel trapped, then you need a vehicle that can start paying you consistently without all your time and energy. Now, some months, it's a lot of time and energy. Like that water event I told you about, a lot of time and energy for me. That sucked. But that only happened one time, right? And so like many months, I don't think about anything. You know what I mean? Like the rent checks come, my tenants are happy, everything's taken care of. So I do invest sometime, but not all the time. And so that's the way I think for people is like, you need to figure out who you are and what you want out of life. If you want more income, and you want more time, then the only way I have not found a better vehicle than real estate, because every other investment, for example, will lock your cash up, but will pay you nothing, right? So like I have Bitcoin, I have stocks, I have all these different things, but I don't take any cash out of those things. Every given month, my income stays the same with those vehicles. So that's why I've chosen to add a house every single year, because it adds to my annual income every year, no matter what.
Man, I'm so glad you came onto this podcast today. I was really looking forward to it. As soon as I texted you over the weekend, I was like, oh, this is going to be good. And this was so good, Albert. And let me ask you one more question. This is the question I ask everybody on the podcast. And why do you think affordable housing, particularly the lack of supply of affordable housing, is so hard to solve for?
Well, there's so many factors, right? So there's, like I said, the stigma attached to the people that have vouchers, right? That's a huge problem. The other thing is people don't know, and that's my duty to tell people regarding the rents. They think, for example, private market rentals is the way to go. Private market can get you the higher rents, so on. So there's two dynamics at play. One, they don't think they can make enough. Two, they think it costs too much. So like that makes people feel like they shouldn't get into the game. So it is a long slog to teach people like, hey, not only are rents pretty strong, but vacancies are zero. So that more than makes up for the rents. So the average tenant, Mike's average tenant's like 7 years. So I've only been doing this for, 4 and change. Mine is 3+. You know what I mean? Like I've had a tenant for more than 3 years. And I've had no one want to move out yet, except for the person I forced to move out. And by the way, I want everyone to know that I have a private market rental. And so one of the things you might say, like, so why are you continuing to invest in Section 8? Which I'll tell you is I found out that I actually make more per dollar of investment in Section 8 than I do in private market. Meaning, so I'll tell you that the house I have, this is an inherited home I inherited in Fairfax, Virginia, only yields $1 for every $200 of house price. So like I'm only getting $4,500 a month on it, and it's a $900,000 price point. So that's total rents. Now, the reason why when I inherited it, me and my brother had to refi the whole property because we couldn't afford the mortgage payment anymore. And it was already on its way to being paid off. So this is like the dirty secret of inheriting property is like you're almost forced into a sale, meaning you're forced into a sale because if you can't afford the mortgage payments, you have to sell it. And if you sell it within a year's time, you're going to sell it as ordinary. It's basically taxed at ordinary income because you haven't held the asset long enough. It's going to be taxed at capital gains rate, which the short-term capital gains is 35%. So you're going to go from zero to whatever the equity is, and you're going to get hit with a 35% tax. So it forces a rental. So we had to refi the house to a new 30-year mortgage just to creep under the rent mark in the area. So even though it's a $900,000 house, it can only generate $4,500 in rents. So that's $1 per $200 of house.
That doesn't work.
That's like 0.5%. That's not the 1% rule. That's the 0.5% rule. What ends up happening is I did the math over and over again in different areas. And I saw that Section 8 rents, typically because of the properties you can acquire, don't need to be as need to be as nice. Is like the requirements are for safety, not for aesthetic. So that by default makes your costs lower because you're not trying to put the nicest fixtures and crown molding and all kinds of crap to get like a private market rental. And that's why I think affordable housing gets a bad rap. It's because people just assume that they see the net dollars of private market rental. They don't see any of the downsides. But with Section 8 or affordable housing, they see all the downside stigmas. Plus they feel like they can't get primo rents. So that creates this illusion that, hey, this is a terrible investment.
Man, I'm so glad you came on and you pulled back the curtains and you demystified that for all of us. And I think the audience today will walk away from this podcast feeling a little bit more inspired, feeling like
I don't know about that,
bit more possible. What's most important is that they know that it's possible because Albert just started this 4 years ago, right? And you're already on your way to 5 properties and you understand the ups and downs and the benefits and some of the potential risks. So you're not going into it blind anymore. And that's really what folks need to understand. So Albert, man, for people that want to work with you and Mike, how can they get more information about you or get in touch with you?
Yeah, no doubt. So Section 8 Secrets, so that's the number 8. So section number 8 secrets.com is our website. And we advocate for a conservative real estate acquisition model. Once you make enough money to do what you want to do, you can do what you want to do. Like you want to go more aggressive, you can, but we are conservative. So what we say is the first house, you won't get your second house for the 5th year. And by the 7th year, usually you can buy almost one a year based off of just the rents that you're generating from your first 2 properties. So we're a slow growth model. We promised over $2 million of real estate over 10 years, but it's going to be slow. And you can go faster. I always say you can always put fuel on a fire, right? But it is a low time investment, low energy investment, in my opinion, to generate more income for yourself, which back to the top of the show, my whole goal is to go surfing more. I just got back from Bali. I was surfing there for a month earlier this year. That is because of the strategic investments that I've continuously made to generate more time for myself.
Man, I'm so happy for you. And again, man, thank you for what you do. Because without people like you, I would never had the home I grew up in. So for that, I really, really appreciate it. I really love that you gave this a chance and you are succeeding in it. Most importantly, and you're so giving and you're willing to come back out.
Well, I definitely had some failures. Yeah, I appreciate the kind words, but I've definitely had some setbacks. But like I said, I came in at a different mindset. I was like, okay, I'm willing to learn some. I know that I won't be that good the first couple of deals, but I'm going to get better fast. And that's the whole game.
Man, I love this. For people that want to follow you on social media, where can they find you or learn more about your businesses?
Yes, you can find me on Twitter at Albert, the number 4 waves. And so I keep it that way because that's like my only goal. I definitely don't talk much about work, but I can answer any question. I would say I'm generally a minimalist. I think like if you follow me, like I try to like say like this is not necessary. Like I only like to focus on what's important to me.
Man, I'm so happy you came on the podcast, Albert. Hey, maybe in a year from now, we'll get you back on the podcast and we'll talk about, man, how many more properties you're acquiring now. I can't wait, man.
So by the way, you'd like this. In May, Mike, he wanted to acquire a new property and which he did, but I took his similar investment and I bought Bitcoin with it. So he like put $28,000 down on a house. I put $28,000 down in Bitcoin. He's up right now, but you know, we'll see.
That's so good. Oh man. I'm telling people you can have your own strategy. You can have your own path. You don't have to follow everyone's model. And I think going back to Albert's point about knowing yourself and knowing your goals and your own strategy and your own end target, right? Beginning with the end in mind, you can craft that future for yourself. What you just possible.
So yeah, by the way, I legit have this advice for, like I said, a small business owner. I've helped mentored and build up some really good people that are working in great careers for themselves. What you really should focus on is the inputs necessary to obtain the life that you think is good, right? So number one, take advice from people who live that life, but pay attention to what it took to get there. Because if you're not willing to do what it takes, you cannot expect the outcome. And I think that is something that people are very misguided with. They're like, oh, they don't look at the work, the investment, the fundraising, right? Like I love like seller financing. Dude, everyone who preaches seller finance to me hates making cold calls. And I'm like, you'll never find one. You'll literally never find one. If you don't like cold calling everyone every single day for 24 hours a day, you'll never find a seller financing deal because they don't exist. They're not advertised. So you don't like cold calling, bro? You're never going to get one.
Such reality. My first seller finance deal was from a guest on the podcast, believe it or not. Right? You got to learn how to pitch. You got to learn, and you got to understand if you go out to creative finance deals,
you only got that though because you had already had authority. So that's one of the things I always talk about. Is like if you don't have authority in your domain, why would anyone with seller financing deal come to you? So you had authority in your domain. So someone said, okay, I'll do it with you. But if you have no authority, the only way to get it is cold calling. And if you hate cold calling, you will never find your first deal of seller financing.
And people just discount the amount of trust that's involved for seller financing.
Yeah,
like people
and the work, right?
You.
All that cold calling, like, dude.
That's exactly right. Man, these have been such valuable gems, man. Thank you so much for coming on to the podcast, Albert.
Yeah, appreciate it.
We're going to have you back soon, man. All right, and we are out.